So this has been an interesting couple of weeks. Interesting, frustrating, enlightening. I could use a lot of other adjectives, but it's probably good enough. I think that it has been an interesting journey. My body has been going through symptoms of fever and aches and congestion and coughing and sneezing and all of those things that happen sometimes when a bug gets into our bodies. And it's been interesting for me because it's lasted longer than anything I've had in recent memory. I spent almost a week with a fever and not doing anything, just lying in bed, not really doing anything. And you know what happens to me? I'm sure many of you have the same thing happen. My personality, little self, just starts screaming. You are just so lazy. You know, it's not okay just to be resting. It's not okay because I think we set it up for ourselves, especially in our culture, that we're valued by our doing. And if you're not doing, somehow you're not valuable. At least maybe that's what I learned. And so if I'm not doing, then I'm just a lump on a log and not contributing. And then it goes, then the fears take us in. Oh my God, what if I don't ever get over this? What if this is it? So that happens. That doesn't usually last very long, but that kind of happens. And then we have all this metaphysical guilt that goes on for us metaphysicians that think, well, if I was thinking the right thoughts, then I wouldn't get sick, right? Or if my vibration was high enough, then I wouldn't get sick, right? So we guilt ourselves. I'm sure I'm the only one that does that, but I'm admitting that I do that from time to time. So it's been an interesting couple of weeks and not being here and just giving myself permission just to take care of myself has been an interesting process. I'm wondering if anybody else ever has that going on, right? So why do we do that? So I had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to read, a lot of time to really just be to some extent, although the mind gets so busy. But I've contemplated this idea of healing. What is this that we call healing? It's a very powerful teaching in our movement, in New Thought in general and in Unity specifically. Our movement was basically founded on the idea of the mind cure movement, that the power of our minds to cure and heal our bodies. And so for those of us who have been Unity students for a long time, if we're failing at that, what does that mean? If I'm not healing, what does that really mean about me? And so I have meditated on that this week somewhat, and I want to share with you some of the things that came to me about this idea of healing. Because what I think happens for us, and I know what happened for me this week, of the past 2 weeks, was I focused on healing. I'm thinking more about the demonstration that the body heals. And one of our primary teachings in Unity about prayer is that we are to remove our attention and our focus from the demonstration, not to focus on the world, the manifested ideas, whatever's manifesting in our lives, That can be a physical illness, that can be some disruption in our relationships, our job, it can be some disruption in our financial situation, family, all sorts of things. Healing happens. And we try to focus on the physical. But what unity has taught from the very beginning is that not to focus on the effect. And so as I've contemplated this idea of what is healing if I'm not focused on the outer? And so I came up with, well, I didn't come up with anything. What came to me about that is three things. That healing is wholeness realized. Healing is oneness recognized. And healing is love revealed. And so I want to talk a little bit about each of those and my perspective on that. Again, removing our attention from the manifest realm. Try to not think about the body. Again, I know this is challenging. I was challenged with this week because the body, when it's not feeling well, wants your attention, doesn't it? It draws you into that. And so I understand that. And I want to say to this, my illness was short-lived. I just want to say to those of you who have been experiencing a long-term physical manifestation, that you have my greatest admiration and respect. Because I know it takes focus. And to claim this idea of healing takes focus. It takes our attention. It takes our commitment. And I would say that while these are simple ideas, they're not always easy to live. But we can live them. Wholeness realized. I started with a reading from Starkey about the I am. He talked about the I am as our true nature. Each of us is an expression of the wholeness of the divine. You may call that God, you may call that life, you may call that source, you may call that the universe. It doesn't matter what you call it. Each of us in our true nature is an expression of that. When I first got into New Thought, it was in religious science, and I kept hearing this phrase, you are perfect, whole, and complete. Perfect, whole, and complete. I got so tired of hearing perfect, whole, and complete. But it's true. Each of us, you are perfect, whole, and complete, regardless of how you judge your body or your relationships or your work or anything on the physical plane. You, the I am of you, is perfect, whole, and complete. Now, is the but brigade showing up? For anybody? Yeah, but you don't know about. But what about? Get the but out of the way, okay? And just recognize at the very nature of each of us is the perfect, whole, complete expression of God by whatever name or nature you know God to be. But what happens for us is that we develop this idea of self because of our physical environment that says, I'm not that, right? Somehow we learn through family, through church, through school, through all sorts of things that we're not that. So we develop this identity that is not this I am. Then we believe that's who we are. We take on messages from the world around us that say we're not valuable, we're not good enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not smart enough, we're not young enough, we're not enough, we're not something enough. So we develop this idea of self that somehow down here, when we are truly the I am, is that truth of who we are. I want to say this maybe I don't want to say it, but I do want to say it, so I'm going to say it. I want to speak to a little bit about the United Methodist decision this past couple of weeks about denying the LGBTQ community full membership in the United Methodist Church. And using that as one example of how religion can put us in a place of less than if we take that on. And many ways that we can take that on. Hopefully there are many people in the United Methodist Church who are not taking that on, but I'm afraid there are many who are. And it speaks to this idea that I am less than, I am not enough, I am not good enough to really be a full member of this denomination. And that's sad. I feel sad about that, and I know many other people do as well. But it sets us up for this idea that we're less than. So here I am. This is my true nature. This is how I'm seeing myself. So what's in that space? What is between my idea of who I am, who I truly am, and realizing my wholeness? All of that stuff. All of the past, all of the belief systems we've taken on, all these ideas about who we are, the BS that we take on, yes, about who we are, and it's really who we're not. So what do we do about that? How do we bring the two together? And I think there are many ways that we do that. We talk about prayer and meditation, of clearing up that energy. Many of us have been through years of therapy, trying to clear up some of that stuff, and certainly that's a valid way to do that. You were here last week, some of you were here last week when Jeff did the singing, the crystal bowls, the vibration. Vibration can help clear up some of that stuff. Energy work helps clear up some of that stuff. But as he also talked about in the book, as I read this morning, it's process of letting go of that and realizing our wholeness. It's not just a concept. It's not just some ideal that we can't possibly realize or come into the awareness of fully. And I think that's something that we have to get down in our soul, down in our spirit. It's not something that is out of reach for us. What we teach in Unity is that ideal self, the I am self, we also call it our Christed self. And we understand that Jesus, as the master teacher, was one who recognized, who totally realized his wholeness. Maybe not all the time, but he realized his wholeness. And we have the same potential. And it's not just about holding it as an idea. It's not about just believing it. It's about taking it down into our hearts, our souls, our spirits, and realizing it. The real I is, I love to say. The real I is my truth. The real I is perfect, whole, and complete. The real I is lacking for nothing. The real I is the embodiment of that divine idea. And you are that. And you are that. And you are that. I am. I am that. I am. Let's say that together. I am that I am. Again. I am that I am. One more time. I am that I am. And so it's important for us to realize our wholeness. Our wholeness. And when we stop thinking something is wrong with us, we stop judging ourselves because of whatever is going on out here. Again, I know it's easier said than done. It takes practice. It takes practice. That's one of the things we talk about. Well, why aren't more people in unity? Because we require self-responsibility. It's not magic. There's not some magic potion. Some pill. I wish there was a pill you could take. But it takes our willingness to be aware, to change the way we think about ourselves, to change the way we talk to ourselves. Who do I believe I am? To bridge that gap between I am, who I am not, and allow the two to become one, to return to that place of wholeness. Second aspect of that is to recognize oneness. Now, when I talk about oneness, I also use the word unity. It's about being one with the divine. But it's also the power of healing, I believe, is in recognizing, observing on the outer, on the inner and on the outer, oneness. Oneness. And what I mean by that really is, as the book talks about, recognizing that it's all God. It's all God. All God. Sometimes I get sort of frustrated with some of the things I hear in New Thought sometimes about, well, it's all God, but illness is not God. What? How can that be true? How can that be true? If God is omnipresence, if God is in everything, in everyone, how can God not be in illness? I don't think it's possible. Martha was telling me earlier, she heard something on the news about a new strain of virus that has evolved. Now, we don't have to pay attention to that necessarily. But what I think about God is this impulse of life, this impulse of evolution. Does that not apply to the bacteria and the viruses? Sure it does. This impulse of life. And so we have that impulse of life within us. But to criticize and to judge ourselves for having illness, not helpful. Not helpful. Now, I do understand the power of the mind. I'm not discounting that at all. But recognizing oneness extends beyond that. Recognizing oneness is recognizing that my body is also God, but so is your body. So are you. So are you an expression of the divine. How often do we find ourselves judging by appearances? Judging each other by appearances, judging ourselves by appearances. I think it's important for us to commit ourselves to recognizing the oneness of all that is. To walk around every day and to align ourselves with the statement that everything is I am. Everything is an expression of the I am. Everything. Had a teacher once that would encourage us to say, I am that. I am. I am that. I am. Looking at other people that we might judge harshly in some way, and instead of judging, say, I am that. I am. I am that. I know sometimes that can be challenging, especially when you observe something that you don't like in another person. To say, I am that. I am. So I'm encouraging us to practice that this week. I am that. I am. We are one. So observing oneness everywhere, I think, is important. And the third aspect is love revealed. And I think that, for me, is about our actions. Our words, our actions, and our willingness to love ourselves right where we are, regardless of what's happening. Again, I'm suggesting we're not focusing on the outer, but we are focusing on the inner first. And to reveal love as the very nature of our being. And then to love ourselves enough that if we are experiencing illness, we stop. We rest. We take care of our bodies. We take care of ourselves. And that we extend that love to each other through our thinking, through our actions. You know, I want to go back to, there's many examples I could use for this, but if I'm using the example of what happened in the United Methodist Church, I can understand for people in the United Methodist Church. I know there is a bishop in Colorado who is a lesbian. I know there are ministers in this region who identify as LGBTQ, and across the country. I can imagine, I can certainly imagine how that must feel. To be told by the governing body that you don't matter, you don't really belong. and the pain that comes along with that. In fact, I heard an interview on CPR recently the bishop was interviewed, talking about how painful it was, heartbroken she was at this decision. And it is in those experiences that we have the opportunity to practice all three of these. To remember our wholeness regardless of what somebody else says or does. To know I am that I am. And what might be even a little more challenging is to observe that I am that. If I'm sitting here as a lesbian bishop of the United Methodist Church and the governing body says, you don't matter, you don't belong, how challenging is it going to be for me to say, I am that, to that governing body? But that is our opportunity. And then from that place, how is love going to be revealed? Again, it begins here. Loving myself right where I am in the midst of whatever is happening out here. First of all, that can also be a bit challenging. But what could be even more challenging is how do I respond to the situation in the greatest degree of love that I can possibly muster? How do I behold those who would discount me in love? How do I speak to them in love? How do I have empathy and compassion for them, me and them? And I believe when we find that place, that is where true healing is found. And that may demonstrate as physical healing, may demonstrate as relational healing. Again, I don't really even like the word healing in that situation, but it is about restoring the flow. Restoring the flow of life and love in whatever situation that is. The physical body. So how do we practice that, even in difficult situations? And I think that is something that is our work. But having that beginning, claiming the healing first, and then allowing the outer to come into harmony with that. There's a lot of healing that has to occur in the body of the United Methodist Church, in the consciousness of the United Methodist Church, and then in the body of the United Methodist Church, I believe. But what is your experience? What is your experience today that you can relate that to? And one thing I want to say before I close, and I know it's getting late. Again, not to be so attached to what we call the physical manifestation of the healing. But that is our preference, of course, and we can affect that in many different ways. But I believe that when we know who we are, when we know that I am one with all that is, when I am committed to allowing love to be revealed through my thoughts, my words, my actions, my empathy and compassion for myself and others, that healing reveals itself in its perfect way. We have to be responsive to the call of the healing within us. It may or may not show up as a body that is perfectly working in the way that you would enjoy that. It may or may not. But I encourage us not to be attached to that. Not to be attached to that. But know that it shows up as a demonstration of what is in our highest good in service to love. I know you don't want to be here for another hour, so I won't say any more. There's a lot more that I want to say about that, and maybe I'll continue this next week. But I wanted just to share with you some of the thoughts I've had this week about what really is healing. And to claim, it was very important for me this week not to say, I am sick. Or not to say, I am not feeling good. But to say, my body is experiencing illness. Or my body is experiencing fever, or whatever that is. It was very important for me to not identify with what was going on in my body. I am perfect, whole, and complete. As I said earlier, I am 100%. My body's just trying to catch up. Right? I am 100%. My mind is trying to catch up. I am 100%. My relationships are coming into alignment with that. Whatever that is for you. And it's a process for most of us.